We are live. This is John Pounders with Now You See TV. I've got my co-host John Hall in the building. What's up, John?
What's up, Big John Pounders? How are you tonight, man?
Doing great, man. Doing fantastic. This is an exciting show. For those of you that did not get a chance to listen to our show with Matthew on True Frequency Radio, this will be a treat for you guys. Interesting story. Matthew has been a victim of MK Ultra for many years now, still a victim, has got a story to tell about it. And we also have David Carrico on tonight, which all of you guys are familiar with. What's up, David? How are you doing tonight?
Hey, just fine, John.
Just fine, that's all?
Yeah, well, just fine. Hey.
What, is that your first cup of coffee or what, David?
Right, yes, my first cup of coffee. And also, Donna's here on the mic tonight.
Hello.
Donna, you're going to have to move your lips when Donna talks, so we...
Yeah, I can do that, yeah. But no, I am really glad and excited to be on tonight. I really appreciate Matthew and his testimony, and I'm just real thankful to be along for the ride tonight, and really appreciate this material being made public.
All right. So for those of you that are tuning in on YouTube and you would like to join us in our Now You See TV chat, feel free to do so. You can click on the link in the YouTube video and it'll take you to our private chat here on Now You See TV, where you'll be able to ask our guests questions or ask us questions near the end of the show. And you'll also, this is a moderated chat over here, so we don't give timeouts or anything like that over here. YouTube, I think they might give you a timeout first to warn you, but we do have moderators over in YouTube as well, and I want to thank you guys that are over there. I know Brent's over there. I'm not sure who else is over there yet, but usually Kevin and Samuel are over there as well. So thank you guys for doing that over there. And so tonight we're going to get this show going because Matthew has a big story to tell. He also has a book that you guys can get a hold of, and I'll let him explain a little bit about that. But basically, we'll start this whole thing off, and I want to get you guys to kind of hear how he got started in this. So, Matthew, tell us a little bit about your beginning in all of this. I know last time we had talked, you had talked about your incident at your workplace. So start there, and let's just keep going and keep rolling until you don't want to go anymore. We can stop you anywhere here through here. Tonight's more laid back than TFR. We don't have commercial breaks, and we just like to have a good time on the show. I always tell people on the show we're not the most professional. We don't try to be, but we do have the best guests, and I believe we cover such a wide variety of content on this channel that it's just amazing. So just feel free, have fun, and this is a family environment. Most of the people that listen here are listeners that listen every time. So welcome, Matthew.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, John. I really appreciate, first of all, that you've now this is your second interview of me, and I really, really appreciate you inviting me on here. And it's really makes me and my wife safer to have these interviews go on because, as you'll discover in the story, and listeners will discover, there's been a lot of danger being a whistleblower of MK Ultra. In terms of where it started, back in 2005. In August that year in Toronto, there was a plane crash on August 2nd, and I was actually working just across from the airport as a computer programmer, and I happened to be at the fourth floor window, which is the highest, and you can go because of the inverted cone near the airport where they can't build the buildings high. So we had a perfect bird's eye view of this plane crash, and it overshot, just landed past halfway, but it didn't land. It just kept going off the end of the runway, knocked over a few light stands, descended into a gully, and then within 30 seconds, white smoke started billowing out. And after that, it was black smoke for the rest of the afternoon, and the plane burned to the ground. So what happens to people, happened to me and a few other people, I think, is that when you see what looks like hundreds of people dying in front of you, you can have what's called a post-traumatic stress event, where you actually, something happens in the mind and you dissociate for that period of time, because it's just too traumatic. And that's what happened to me. I fled through a stairwell from the fourth floor, a cement stairwell, and by the time I came out of that stairwell, I knew I was a different person, because I had imagined the deaths and the faces of all of these people burning up, and it was just a horrible vision. And so when I came out of that stairwell, I was quite affected. And within 6 to 18 hours, I had no memory of the plane crash, which was a pretty strange thing. And people afterwards were asking me if I saw the plane crash, and I said, no, I didn't see it because I didn't remember anything. Then on August 19th, 2.5 weeks later, in 2005, in Toronto, we had a tornado evacuation because a tornado touched down in Fergus, Ontario. And again, it was one of these traumatic things where they tried to evacuate just our team from the building, and I started arguing with the team leader and saying, look, if we're facing a natural disaster, we should be, in fact, evacuating everybody, not just our team. And he said, no, we've talked to those other teams already. Look, just our team's evacuating. And if you don't, like it, you're staying here. You understand you're staying here. Just say that you understand that you're on your own. I said, okay, fine, I'm on my own. So me and another guy felt sort of pressured into staying, and we both stayed. And unfortunately, it was a very bad situation. We were the only people on the northwest corner of that building. And that's where the tornado came in, and it started obliterating the windows with debris, and finally it sounded like gunshots as high-speed, high-velocity hailstones and actual rocks were hitting the windows. And we both went under our desks immediately because it sounded like the windows were going to break. And that's curtains when that happens in a tornado. And I went into shock within about 15 minutes. And once I was in shock, I was in bad shape. And within about 45 minutes, someone tried to rescue me, a gentleman who was really a hero. And in so doing, he tried to bring me out of the building through the same stairwell I had fled after seeing the plane crash. And I was in shock at this point, and that stairwell equaled death in my mind. So I immediately ran back to my desk and said, no, I can't go there. The second time, he got more organized and had his daughter, who works in an office beside the CEO on the lower floor. It's interesting, buildings near the airport, the management is in the lower floors. Anyway. When she was fetched, she held the door open. He tried to force me through with his arm around me and literally forcing me through. And I just snapped because I was in such bad shock that I had one pupil largely dilated and the other one pinned really small. And I grabbed him by the lapels and I threw him, which is a terribly violent, terrible thing to do. And I feel terrible about it. But in my oxygen-deprived mind, he was trying to kill me because that stairwell equaled death in my oxygen-deprived mind. Anyway, so he landed on the third stair. He grabbed the railing and just sprained his arm, but other than that, he was okay. And he then took control of the situation and proceeded to talk me down, and then eventually get some help from me. My 13-person team from the basement came up. They were all Chinese, and they know this rapid hand massage that got me partially out of shock. And because I had been violent, he decided that I should be interrogated. And so he got his 200-pound nephew to come to work immediately. And he took me to an unoccupied floor, to a darkened room, sat behind me with his nephew, and started asking me questions. Have you ever thought of harming yourself or harming other people? Now, at this point, I was partially out of shock, but still partially in shock. And I was thinking, well, I've just been violent. I'm going to be charged with assault, and I'm going to lose my career, because as a computer programmer, you have to work in highly secure environments. You can't have a criminal record. So I thought, well, I've got to give him something. In my sort of oxygen-deprived mind, I decided that I should sort of exaggerate and confabulate a discussion I'd had 10 years earlier, in 1995, regarding a neoconservative politician whose actions resulted in the deaths of over a dozen people. And so I decided that I would exaggerate this discussion I had with my friend and make it sound like we were planning evil things back then, which we were not. But in my oxygen-deprived mind, that's what I thought I should do, which turned out to be a big mistake. And that was when right there is when I was tagged as a potential terrorist. And that was August 19th. And then I started noticing I was being surveyed. There was people in cars, well-dressed, well-groomed men sitting in cars watching my house. Then I got a phone call from him in October. And it went something like this. Hi, Matthew. And I said, hi, Gary, how are you doing? And he said, well, listen, Matthew, have you been interrogated yet? And I said, interrogated? By whom? And he said, the authorities. And I said, no. He said, oh, those guys, talk to you later, Matthew. Click. And then I knew something was going to happen. Something bad was going to happen. And sure enough, about 3 weeks later, later in October, towards the end of October, a gas company inspector came to my house. And he decided that I should get this free energy conservation program, and he would need to get access to my furnace room. And I fell for it. And so I let him in. And while he was in my furnace room, he asked me to turn the hot water on at a bathtub upstairs. And when I said to him, well, there's a bathtub down here, because we have a fully finished basement, as you can see behind me, he was very disappointed. He said, oh, you have a bathtub down here, a bathroom down here? He was like, right away my antenna went up. Uh-oh, why does this guy want to be alone in my furnace room? So I played along, and I turned the hot water on for 2 or 3 minutes. I came to the furnace room, and he was all finished, and he was acting kind of furtive and anxious, and he took me upstairs, and he had me sign an invoice for $0 with white, yellow, and pink copies, or white, yellow, and green, actually. And I just had to put my big signature, which was later used, as I'll explain. And that's when I knew that something was really bad was going to happen, because I found out on a website that that's what the authorities do when they want to get access to your house and do a search and they don't have probable cause. And sure enough, when he left, he didn't stop at any other neighbor's houses. He just got in the van and drove away. And then this is everything up until November 22nd, when the big event happened in 2005, which is a cold night. I mean, it's up in Canada here. It was cold. I was walking north just a few blocks from my house towards my house on Yonge Street, which is the center of Toronto, Canada's largest city, when I was approached by a guy that was 5'11", short blonde hair, blue eyes, and a slim build and a slightly long chin. And he was standing beside a 6'3", 230-pound, very large guy with bushy black mustache and bushy black hair that was medium length. And he was an RCMP officer, as I later found out, which was our Royal Canadian Mounted Police, our paramilitary. So, and the guy on the first guy was actually a Joint Task Force, which is part of the U.S. military who run Guantanamo Bay. And as they said, look, Mr., are you Matthew Pauly? And they said, well, look, we just have a question for you. Why is it that you have 3 bottles of hydrogen peroxide in your basement, in your furnace room? And I was really, really surprised. By the way, my screen went blank. Anyway, you still see me?
Yeah, we're still here. I just turned off my camera for a second because I was going to get up. You're still loud and clear, though.
Okay. So when I saw that they were very serious and they had this question, I answered them truthfully, which is, well, yes, I do have 3 bottles of hydrogen peroxide in my furnace room, and the reason is I was using them as a disinfectant for growing a certain fungus, which Central American Indians have found helps migraine headaches. And my wife suffers from debilitating migraine headaches, and big pharma solutions aren't working for her. So that's what I did. And they said, well, okay, that's interesting. Listen, we just have a few more questions. We have a van just a block away. It's pretty cold outside. Why don't you just come with us for a few minutes, and we'll just get this over with. And I thought, well, okay, I know what's happened. There's a misunderstanding based on that interrogation at work. I'll just straighten it out with these guys. Everything will be fine. And they marched me through Postal Station K parking lot with the postal vans all the way back going down this parking lot. And it was all darkened. Normally there's 3 sodium vapor lights, but it was all dark that night. And I stopped about halfway through because they had told me to march in front of them. And I was feeling not comfortable, and I didn't want to be compliant. I stopped, and the big guy yelled at me, "Keep walking," really loud, and which frightened me. And so I decided to keep walking. And then on the other side of that parking lot, there was this big 5-ton monocolored military armored van. And I only found out later it was military. I didn't know at the time. And so there was a guy on each side of the van and a guy behind on the other side of the van and 2 guys behind me. So I was literally surrounded by special forces. And so I decided to comply. And they opened the door in the back, which said, and the guy leaned out and said, "Matthew, come on in." So I got in the van. And my life changed forever after what happened in that van. Maybe I'll just take a little moment here. And have any questions so far?
I got one for you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had this happen to you and you just didn't have any warning at all?
Well, I mean, yeah, there was no official warning, but I mean, I'm a reasonably smart guy, and I could see the escalating pattern of surveillance, starting from the guys watching me in the cars, the call from Terry asking if I'd been interrogated, then the gas company guy, which turned out was not a gas company guy, And then, I could see the escalating pattern of surveillance. So I knew that this was something was going to happen, but I didn't know what exactly.
Matthew, do you think this was random, that you just kind of fell into their wheelhouse, or do you think you were chosen for some reason?
Oh, I think I was chosen. And the two reasons I were chosen were during that interrogation in the workplace. In addition to me, laying a slightly false trail about confabulating and exaggerating a discussion that I'd had 10 years earlier, I also was asked about my childhood stuff. And what happened was, as I was in deep shock in that stairwell, and I was like I was going to die. I mean, it was really serious. I suddenly remembered something from about 30 years earlier when I was 8 years old, and where I had been exposed to a serial killer, and who, in addition to sexually assaulting me to shut me up, he dug up a dead body in the forest in rural British Columbia, a recently deceased young lady who was naked in an unmarked grave, and sat her up and pointed to her and maybe pushed me in front of her and said, "This is what's going to happen to you and your mother if you tell anybody." And when I related that story to Terry, he immediately asked details. I gave him the dates, I gave him the names, I gave him the postal codes, and I said, yes, tell the RCMP. And because, something's got to be done to stop this person. And when I did that, it established that I'd suffered from severe psychological traumas as a child. Now, it turns out that this training exercise in this van, which was documented on the Department of National Defense up in Canada website in 2006, it was documented in 2005 as being Joint Control Unified Command. And this was between JTF and JTF-2, which is the Canadian Special Forces. And the JTF guy was teaching the JTF-2 guy how to do coercive interrogation, or what's called enhanced interrogation techniques, which is a nice way of saying torture. And the second part of that interrogation exercise part was actually something which did not appear in the D&D description. The second half was mind control. That is torture until a person dissociates, that is their mind splits, they become very passive, and they're almost, they can die in shock in that state. And then they're hypnotized and forced to repeat post-hypnotic suggestions to be triggered in the future, once they're out of the trance, even months and even years later, to do a certain action given a certain trigger. And they need, for that purpose, people who've had a history of psychological traumas, a history of dissociation. Because it turns out that dissociating the mind is like chopping a block of wood. You have a round of wood. The first time you chop it in half, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of strikes, even a wedge to chop it in half. But once you got a half piece, and you go to chop that into quarters, it's much easier. Similarly, you take the quarter piece, you chop that into eighths, it's much easier. Well, it turns out splitting the mind, dissociation, is the same thing. So you don't want to be torturing a person for several hours until they dissociate. It's hard on the people in the van and the people around, right? The torturer doesn't care because he's a sadist. He gets a pleasure out of it. But the people in the van that are being trained, it's going to be hard on them. So they want to try to get someone who dissociates quickly. So what you need is someone who has a history of severe psychological traumas in their childhood. That means they're going to dissociate in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes of torture.
Let's take a quick step back real quick, because there's a lot of people that are listening. Well, I don't know if there's a lot of people. Most of our listeners are really educated into this stuff. But in case there's people jumping on right now that have no idea what MK Ultra is, can you give a brief history before we go further into the timeline of things? Give a brief history on what MK Ultra is, how it started, and where it came from, because I think that's really important for people to understand if they don't know what we're talking about here.
Absolutely, John. Thank you for bringing that up. That's very appropriate. And first I'll say, first of all, in 1945, there was something called Operation Paperclip. And during Operation Paperclip, this was a program to resettle about 8,750 Nazi scientists from Nazi Germany to America. About half of them were rocket scientists and were put to NASA, and the other half were mind control scientists. And these were Dr. Joseph Mengele's peers. Dr. Joseph Mengele was the most horrible angel of death, they called him. He was the most awful, horrific sadist, and he did horrible, brutal experiments and murders of twin Jewish children. And so these people, these scientists, were brought to America, and they were put in the CIA and in the military. for the very purpose of developing mind control. So shortly after they arrived in 1945, they started a program called MK Ultra, and the MK is from the Latin Germanic phrase mental control. And ultra, of course, means really heavy duty. So this is like really heavy duty mind control. And this is completely nefarious. There's no useful purpose for this, except to deceive citizens of your country and voters of your country by staging false flag events by mind-controlled actors who have no memory of what they've done afterwards and can't finger the real doers. Anyway, so MK Ultra, the program was formed by the CIA. It ran from 53 approximately through late 60s or experimentation going on, non-consensual, violated the Bill of Rights, violated United Nations charters and Geneva Conventions. So finally there was it was a Senate inquiry in 1977. And at that inquiry they said, the CIA said, we've stopped this, we're not doing this anymore. But we know that's false because a former deputy director, Victor Marchetti, said that that's a cover story. And furthermore, there's many people who can testify, including myself, that this program is ongoing. It's just gone covert since 1977. It's black operations, which is more fun for them anyway. They get to practice their spy skills at the same time as they're doing these horrible experiments on people. So the goals of the program are, one, to create a truth serum this is a legitimate idea, right, to interrogate spies. But really, the real program is really about coercing people through an incapacitating agent, such as scopolamine, and using torture, trauma, and using hypnosis to do things against their will, their self-interest, and even their survival instinct, and have no memory about it afterwards. So you can make a person do something horribly against their willpower and their interests, such as go and shoot somebody, and then they have no memory about it afterwards, so they can't finger the real doers who made them do it. Go ahead.
I just want to interject something. I've always thought that all kinds of abuse have to do with decreasing the population in a way and be controlled. So if you're dysfunctional and you are disassociated or do disassociate, then a lot of times those people have trouble really being functional in our society. So I think it's another way to reduce the population that would have all their faculties. In other words, I think that might be part of the big goal of all this. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the result of dissociation is that you have what's called, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is an illness which can be cured, given enough therapy, enough time, and enough supportive environment and a safe environment, and the support of friends and family. So it's not like there's faculties missing. It's just the person is ill for a while. I think it's more of an opportunistic thing that they choose these people because it makes it much, much easier to use them as mind control subjects because they can torture them for a much shorter period. Now, in terms of the overall goal of taking these mind controlled slaves and doing false flag terror events, I think there is some tie-in with the whole depopulation agenda, because once you have coerced a population through terror events to accept the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, the Anti-Terrorist Act up in Canada here, people give away their rights and freedoms because they think that they need to do that to protect themselves from, quote unquote, the terrorists, which was actually a big false flag operation using MK Ultra patsies, coordinated by intelligence agencies. Then you can do things like get away with chemtrail spraying, which is definitely a depopulation agenda, because people can't organize when they don't have privacy. They don't have the right of assembly. They don't have the rights to do a lot of things because they're being gang stalked, because they've been identified as a target, as a potential terrorist, because they happen to store food in their basement, or they happen to care about the environment and sign petitions. So yes, I think that you can link it to the depopulation agenda.
Matthew, do you believe that this serial killer that you were exposed to as a young man, do you believe that he was a programmed assassin and that this was the moment when he exposed you to that trauma? Do you believe this was the moment when you were really chosen?
Well, I mean, you could say that in the context that once I was exposed to that level of violence and that level of persecution, that later in my life I was a sitting duck to be chosen as a candidate. So that's definitely a possibility. But at the time, this person was a 17-year-old kid, and he had a father who was German, and he had definitely been abused, I'm sure, from his father. And his father was in on this. And I'm sure if the father was the serial killer, or he was the serial killer, or both of them were serial killers. But they were definitely covering for each other, because after the event, literally that same day, after I went hysterical, the guy grabbed his father and me and took me back to the site, and his father had buried the body and tried to give me this cover story about this religious beliefs. This is the way they bury their dead, and I'm not to tell the RCMP ever. And he made me promise, and he looked in my eyes, and they were very cold eyes. And I was all alone with these guys in the middle of the wilderness in the Kootenay Mountains in British Columbia. And he says, "You've got to promise." And I knew if I didn't promise in that moment that I might die. So I promised. And it took 30 years for me to remember that. And later in life, I was a sitting duck to be chosen for this kind of experimentation as a result of the severe traumas that I underwent.
Yeah. Do you think that events like Sandy Hook and the Colorado theater shooting, that MK Ultra has anything to do with these type of events? Well,
I would say 100% yes. And specifically, I must confess that I haven't studied the Sandy Hook thing, but I know people that are good friends of mine who have done the research and have confirmed that for Sandy Hook. I can tell you I've done some research on James Holmes and the Colorado so-called Batman theater shooting, and absolutely 100% it has all the indications. I mean, first of all, in the courtroom, his eyes are super dilated. And when you're on scopolamine, your eyes are super dilated. Okay? Second, he stayed at the scene in his parked car at the theater, just like a good patsy would do. So I don't even think he was a patsy, because there are actual witnesses in the theater who saw two men, and there was 2 gas masks found at the scene. Because you can't take somebody off the street and program them as an MK Ultra killer in a matter of a month or two and get them to shoot up a bunch of people in the theater. You need someone who's been, from birth or from young childhood has been in the program. These are the so-called super soldiers. That's who are the real, shooters of mass number of people. In fact, we saw 3 such people present in San Bernardino. The people in the medical center across the street from the shooting saw 3 men all dressed in black with bulletproof vests, AK-47s, balaclavas, and through the holes in the balaclavas, you could see they were Caucasian. And they were shooting, and people were falling. So this Muslim couple gets blamed for it, and they drove away, and the police say that they shot it, and maybe they did. But they weren't necessarily the killers at all. I don't believe that. But going back to James Holmes, we also have some context here. James Holmes' father was a senior banking expert and was about to testify in an investigation about corruption in the banking business. And what not a better way to stop him from doing that than putting his son as a patsy in a mass shooting. And furthermore, he was a normal, very successful guy doing research in mind psychiatric stuff. And then all of a sudden he dyes his hair red and becomes kind of strange looking. And that's exactly a painting and a portrait of creating someone who's going to look like a believable killer. So I think he's 100% innocent.
Yeah. How many people would you say that the government would have at this time that they could access to do things like this? Do you think they would have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was asked this question before, and I did a quick extrapolation, and it goes as follows. I know there's 5 in Toronto alone, just like presently in the last few years, minimum 5. And that's the 5 that I know of. So if you extrapolate to those that I don't know of, but just being by one factor of 10, okay, that's 50. All right, now that's in Canada's largest city, representing 12% of the population. So if you multiply that 50 by about 10, because of the whole population of Canada, you're into 500. Well, now in the United States, it's 10 times the population, so you're looking at about 5,000. And that's just present. What about the ones who were programmed 10 years ago? There's another 5,000, right? So you've probably got at least 10,000 in the United States, which is plenty. All you need is a handful to completely destabilize society through horrific terror events that appear to be attributed to whatever the boogeyman ideology of the day is. Used to be Marxism, now it's Islam.
So what do you think their end game is? Where are they headed with all this?
Well, again, this is just conjecture. I don't know what their minds are, but I mean, I think there's a definite move towards increasing the role of the United Nations as a world government, and therefore bringing United Nations soldiers into America, sending the real military out of the country to fight wars, and then potentially disarming the society and getting much more control over people. And this is part of a global agenda by the wealthiest of the wealthy, with the so-called 13 families, people like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, who own all the world banks. All the national banks in the world are owned by that family. They're trillionaires. And they win. When they since the Napoleonic Wars, they've been found to be funding both sides of wars. And the reason they fund both sides is because the more damage and destruction to a country, the more money they're going to have to borrow from the central banks to reconstruct the country. When you've got this level of evil and malevolence going on at the world level, you can see the end game really is the intel agencies are being controlled by these higher powers, and they're looking to get more and more control over and create more servile population that is completely surveyed, can't resist, almost like George Orwell's 1984.
So we're basically, I guess, talking about the concept of the New World Order and of the Masonic Illuminist concept of order out of chaos. And yes. Matthew, I wondered, would you feel comfortable about talking about the Masonic oath you were asked to take under duress?
Yeah. Before I get to that, I should just mention that the person who's been working on me since 2005, he wants to go by the alias of Mitch. And he told me in a home invasion, of which I've had 5 since 2014, and he's always armed. He has at least 2 weapons on him, an all chromed 38 and a black 9mm. And he's put them to my head. And he's tortured me, etc. It's been really horrific. And not to mention assault, a very bad kind of assault. This gentleman, I shouldn't say gentleman, this person said to me that in my presentation at the University of Toronto, I must have a slide that shows the cover page of the 1977 Senate investigation into MK-Ultra. Because on the cover page, down at the bottom, and he said it's really important, because he hit me like this, because I was saying that I had to cut the page off. And he said, no, I can't help it. You know, this is a portrait page, and in PowerPoint slides are landscape. He says, well, okay, fine, but you've got to show the symbol at the bottom. The symbol of the bottom is this 8 arrows pointing outwards. It's the symbol of chaos. And that's on the cover page of the Senate investigation of MK-Ultra. Wow. And so that's pretty disturbing. And in terms of what you're talking about, you brought up, yes, it's true. In a home invasion, this was in February of 2016, at my kitchen counter, we have a nice breakfast bar, and at that breakfast bar, he put this document out. He had just woken me up because he puts me to sleep with scopolamine, and then he wakes me up. He goes around my house and looks through all my books and all my belongings, and then he wakes me up and he says, Matthew, this document, you have to sign this. And this document, it just had 2 sentences. And it started off, I just read the first sentence, and it said, I pledge allegiance in my life to the Masonic order. And then it went on. And I didn't read the rest of it because I didn't want to know what it was. But I was under so much duress. I was torture trauma dissociated. I was blasted on scopolamine, which is an incapacitating agent. And I had no free will. And he said, this fountain pen, Matthew, I drew blood from you when you were asleep, and I've loaded it into this pen. And sure enough, when I signed it, it was red ink that looked like blood. And so he made me do that. which connects the U.S. military and I won't name them, the Civilian Intelligence Agency of the United States. It connects them to the Masonic Order, that he made me do that.
So you've been on Coast to Coast. I think you've been on Coast to Coast.
Yes.
John B. Wills, On with John, on Truth Frequency Radio, and now on Now You See TV.
Yes.
Do you fear any repercussions or backlash from coming on and telling your story?
Yes, there is repercussions and there is backlash, and I've been told that I'm no longer allowed to do this or they'll kill me. That was in the June 19th abduction that I was told that. But at the same time, I know that this is a way of saving my life, or at least giving me a little lease on life, because the higher profile I am in telling my story, the more people that are going to notice when I am suddenly deceased from an accident, or a sudden onset of cancer, or my car suddenly has a terrible problem and I die in a terrible crash, or something as simple as I get stabbed or shot.
You said that it's a home invasion. Do you ever see it coming? Do you ever see him coming, or do you never see him come into the house? Only once? Yeah,
only once. And I have increasingly increased the security of my house. I've gone through 3 burglar alarm systems in 2015 and into 2016. I spent over $10,000 on security. I've hired security guards, including armed security guards, for up to a week at a time. But I can't stop this. I mean, these people are experts. This is what they do for a living as special forces and spies, at doing covert black ops. But one time, I was on my couch, and he used a technology from outside, okay? So I didn't know when he was even there. It's called voice to skull. And this was invented back in the 1970s. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice. And it's microwaves, that are 2 microwave beams that come together right beside your ear, and it stimulates the cochlea in your inner ear, and you hear what they say into the microphone perfectly. And so I hear this voice saying, "Matthew, we know where you are. You're on the couch. Stay there. This is a black operation. Don't move." And there was 2 guys banging at the back door, and because I put this big lock, it was this. I have 7 locks in the back door. This is a U-shaped thing with a cane, like a rod, and you wedge it underneath the doorknob. And so it took 2 guys to kick the middle of the door and then kick the bottom of the door, and the middle of the door, the bottom of the door, and they did it rapidly, one after the other like this, and gradually they inched it forward. Now, in those few seconds, had I not been hypnotized by hearing his voice, and he used a code word on me that made me immediately fall into a trance and become passive, if I had not been hypnotized by that voice-to communication, I probably could have reached the phone and dialed 911, but I couldn't. So they came in, and that was it.
Incredible. And I'm sitting there thinking of, the bodyguards, the security that you have to seriously vet these people before you even allow them to guard you. I mean, if they are that good, you have to vet these people seriously. You had mentioned the serial killer when you were younger. Anything prior to that, anything in your upbringing that you remember that led you to that moment, or
Yes.
Was it just a normal childhood?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was an idyllic childhood on one half, because my father was a cultural anthropologist, very well educated, and very smart, and very concerned about helping the world and making the world a better place. And in a lot of ways, a good father. In other aspects, not such a good father, from his own problems with his own father. And so he wasn't very, how shall we say, warm and fuzzy and caring. On the other hand, my mother, it was a really bad situation with my mother. She was very ill, and I don't know exactly what her issues were, but she was diagnosed with all sorts of illnesses, mental illnesses mostly. And she had co-custody, or not co-custody, but she had us on the weekends and also in the summer breaks and the Christmas holidays for half of each. And the problem is, every time she'd be with us, she'd be stressed from caring for 2 children, and she'd inevitably lose it. And she'd become like manic or psychotic, and she'd try to kill herself or kill us. And so there was some severe traumas. And then she ultimately was the one who took us to Argenta, BC, in this Quaker community where this horrific abuse occurred. because she wasn't taking care of us, and we were wandering through this mountain community of 500 people with unaccompanied, and we were prey for adults. And that's sort of what happens and how it happened to me.
Matthew, I just want to say I am so thankful that you have had the courage to speak out about this. There's so many people that try, but to have a cognate story and to be able to put the parts together. I know you're a very unusual victim because we've talked to other victims and we know that this is not usually the case. So I am really thankful and proud that you've been able to articulate this so well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. As I've said I really appreciate that. As I've said in my previously that, I was very affected by a book by I'm not sure if he's a doctor, but Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. So in my early 20s, I read this book in university, and it really changed me because he was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he noted that of the people that actually survived the camps, of course, which was an infinitesimally small number of people, there were many people that had the same criterion but didn't survive. But the ones that survived, he noticed they all had a profound meaning in life, a reason for living. They had a family that they loved, they wanted to be back to. They had a book they needed to write. They wanted to start, a program or something. The point being that meaning in life is critical to being able to survive, really difficult circumstances. So when I realized that my childhood was really bad, I decided that I needed to follow Viktor Frankl's advice. So I decided from that moment forward to dedicate myself to making the world a better place for not only this generation, but future generations. And so in a way, this horrific thing that's happened to me in my life has given me a chance to contribute to this world, which I probably wouldn't have had this not occurred. So in that sense, I'm grateful and I'm blessed that I was given the opportunity to make a difference.
Matthew, do you have any idea why you're able to recall things so well, which is indeed unusual to most people that are subjected to this MK Ultra? Why do you think it is that you're able to do this?
Right. Now, that's a good question. I just found out, and again, that was in the January or the February home invasion. I believe it was the January one. Mitch said, Matthew, I need to know, what is it about your memory? How come you're able to recall dialogue so well? Is there anything you have any tests done every time that you have some special abilities? I said, no, I don't think so. And I thought, well, hold a sec. When I was about 11, I did this test, and it's where they read you a set of random words, and they see how many you can repeat back in perfectly in order. And the human average IQ is about 7 words, but I could do 11 words, which is over 50% more, which means I'm somewhat of a savant for recalling dialogue. And you'll see that in my book, The Murder of Time, Making and Unmasking a Sleeper by Matthew Polly. You'll note there's a lot of dialogue, and this is actually true dialogue. And Mitch said that he looked through all the MK Ultra files going back to the 1950s. Never has anybody been able to do what I did, which was I documented the dialogue going up until forced electric shock. And then right after the electric shock ceased and I regained consciousness, the dialogue picks up perfectly without a mistake. And no one has been able to do that. So yeah, I do have some sort of special abilities for recalling things, which, I mean, in a way makes me an ideal whistleblower, and which sort of I scratch my head like, why wouldn't they kind of click onto this, that maybe it's a good idea to let me go, like don't harass me anymore, don't do this to me anymore. But I don't know why.
I have a favorite verse. Sorry, David. But it's Romans 8:28 in Holy Bible. It says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. I have to look at my abuse like that God had a purpose, and I'm going to use that for his glory. And that's what I do when I try to tell my story. So that's what a lot of people say is their verse that gives them courage. So I just thought I'd throw that in. Okay, David had something to say here.
Well, I believe it's just an ability that the Lord has given you because he wants you to do just what you're doing now to help so many people, not only the people that are involved in this program, but the society that is being harmed by this agenda, because the capacity for evil that they have is just unbelievable. When you just begin to think of the things that they could pull off with these controlled assassins at their beck and call, there's just no limit to it. And a very famous case that, and I've heard you talk about this before, so I know you're aware of it, but maybe you could just briefly give us your take on Sirhan, if you believe that Robert Kennedy's assassin is involved in MK Ultra.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the first major successes in basically doing a false flag operation where they assassinated an incredible man who was a real leader and could have made a huge influence on this country. In the world and in the United States. and Sirhan, the killer, there's no question in my mind. Let me give you some of the indications. First of all, during the actual event, the gun that he was holding had to be pried out of his hand by 5 people. 5 people to pry the gun out of his hand. Now, the only way that could be is if he was in a hypnotic trance or dissociated or both, which typically would be both for this kind of operation. Second, he had no memory of what happened that day forever. To this day, he's rotting in jail and he has no memory of what happened. And that's entirely consistent with being dissociated, because when you're dissociated, the entire period of time that you're dissociated, let's say it's like 3 hours, that time, as soon as you get out of the dissociation period, and you're out of it now, you have no memory, you have amnesia about all that time that elapsed. And that amnesia will last from months to decades. And the reason it takes a long time is you have to have therapy, you have to have access to a safe environment. Now, Sirhan is in maximum security jail. That's really not a safe environment. Jail is not safe. You have to have access to support from family and friends. And he has probably very little of the above, certainly not the security, the safe environment. So to this day, he has no recollection of what happened that day, which is entirely consistent with, in fact, it's about the only explanation for having that kind of amnesia, is if he was torture trauma dissociated, it was scopolamine and hypnosis and all that. By the way, I just want to mention, David and Donna, that I really, really appreciate you spending some time with me, talking to me the other day and Skyping with me. And because, I mean, the spiritual support that you gave me really made a difference, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. We were glad to meet you and share that time with you too, Matthew.
Yeah, we really, really were. And we just appreciate your heart and what you're trying to do. And it's so, so very important. And this is such a huge part of this New World Order agenda that people really need to be aware of, because it's just a horrific thing. And it's one of those type of things that it stretches our belief system that people would be so evil to do things like this. But this is exactly how the Nazis accomplished their near conquest of the world, through these very same tactics that have now been imported into our country and our intelligence system. And really, we should expect no less than people that will do whatever they need to do to seize control and to take power, because this is just the story of the human race. And
yes,
it's just really a unique look into this that you're giving us. And I think it's a look that, quite frankly, I don't know where else you would get this look and this insight into this that we're getting with what you're telling us.
I
have a question before we go too much further. Now, you've been involved in this for a while, and this is something that's been going on, still continually going on. We've talked about this before, but how is this affecting your work, your family, the people around you? Because obviously it can't be a good thing, obviously. And we've talked about it before, and you mentioned stuff about it, but go ahead and mention it to this crowd. I believe this is a different crowd than the TFR crowd. So,
Sure. It's been quite frankly devastating for all of the above categories. In terms of my life, I mean, my health has diminished significantly because of what they do with us is once we become whistleblowers and we've been in the program for a long time and we start to cause, resistance, they graduate us to lethal weapons tests, just as was done by Dr. Joseph Mengele in the concentration camps of World War II, like Auschwitz. So I've had injections that cause cancer. I've had injections of biologicals which cause illness, and I've had chemicals tested on me. And I narrowly escaped death a few times so far. So my health has been impacted significantly. Obviously, my mental health, but post-traumatic stress disorder is rather severe. And finally, they've gone after my wife now, and they're targeting her and threatening to hurt her. And they're threatening, like I was threatened in the February home invasion, which also turned into an abduction outside of my house to an apartment building nearby, where a gunman, a hitman, was brought in to intimidate me. And they threatened to kill my 6-year-old niece. So they're now traumatizing my family. And it's gotten to the point where they've gone after my career now. They've attacked me in my workplace twice. Though my last 2 contracts have ended early. I'm 30 years as a computer expert, systems analyst, architect, computer programmer. I was once chief scientist of a public company. And they have just neutralized my career here in Toronto by attacking me in the workplace, in an elevator, drugging me with scopolamine, spray to the face, injection right through my suit, and then literally, basically pushing me into the workplace naked and drugged, and which obviously had catastrophic consequences on my career. And so the police can't do hardly anything because they're not equipped to investigate crimes by professionals at doing crimes, professionals at doing black operations. They don't have the training and the manpower to be able to do this. They've tried. I must give them credit. When they go by my house and they see that when I had bushes in the front, they would check the front bushes for me, make sure no one was in there. That was, it's the thought that counts. The other thing they did was they interrogated him. They got him into custody and interrogated him because I actually managed to grab some evidence of his actions. But they couldn't get him. They couldn't hold him for 2 reasons. One, he's not going to crack under crack under interrogation because he's trained to withstand torture in North Korea or something like that, right? Because he's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Joint Task Force and also a member of the Civilian Intelligence Agency. Secondly, how can they possibly get anything on him when there's no evidence, of very, very little evidence to try and hold him down with? Finally, he has diplomatic immunity. He works in the U.S. consulate here in Toronto on University Avenue. So he's untouchable, and therefore the police can't stop it. And so my career has been destroyed. I've lost my contract with a massive bank, which is so big, it owns 2 U.S. banks. And I was one of their top architects, and now I've lost it all. And I've lost the contract before for the same kind of thing. Someone came into the workplace and assaulted me. So I can't work anymore in my field in Toronto. So we've just sold a house a week ago, and we don't even know where we're going. I mean, we do have a condo nearby, but it doesn't make sense for me to be close to my wife when they're targeting my wife. As a man, the first responsibility to my wife is to protect her. So if me being with her is going to put her in danger, then I have to leave.
Really hate to hear that, Matthew, but you do have to do what you have to do to protect your loved ones. And it's hard choices sometimes. We all may have to face something like that eventually as the world gets worse and worse. We don't know what we'll be called to do during times of tribulation.
Can I just say one positive thing? I don't know. I don't want to make this too big, but there is some people in the civilian intelligence agency, and particularly in the military, who disagree with what's being done here. And in fact, I have been corrected in my book by Mitch. A number of details were corrected because he wanted to make sure the book went out. And he wanted to control the content. He actually deleted a major chapter, which I had to rewrite from scratch. He wanted to control the content, but he wanted the truth to come out. And which means that there's someone above him who's allowing him to get away with this. And so I'm alive. I mean, normally a person wouldn't live through to do the truth telling that I am. And because there are some people in those organizations that don't agree with the complete, basically, perversion of our democracy by forces greater than the United States of America, greater than Canada. We're talking worldwide forces that have a lot of power. And these people don't like it. And therefore, they see the misuse of this technology as a problem for our democracy.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the joint task force that this individual's involved with, that they have the oversight at Guantanamo Bay.
That's right.
And do you believe that MK Ultra is active at Guantanamo?
I certainly do, because I have read online that there was a psychological or interrogation research facility going on, and I think that it's quite evident wherever there's been these kinds of camps of people that have no rights that we see research going on them, human experimentation. And the people that have come out of there, some of them have reported very unusual, horrific psychological manipulations being done to them. So yes, I think there is some MK Ultra R&D going on at Guantanamo Bay.
This could certainly give us a unique perspective and understanding of why they would want to release so many of these people. This would give them control of actual people that are going back into Islamic countries, and the possibilities there are just frightening for everybody concerned.
Yes, I mean, we must say, of course, that like 90% of those people are innocent and were not terrorists to begin with, and were rounded up because that was the way of getting more budget to say that we're getting all these terrorists, and this has been proven again and again. But I mean, I agree with you that the people that are being let go, who knows what's been done to them? Who knows if they're sleepers? I suspect that you're going to see a number of sleepers in that crowd, people that they can now control to do things for them in these countries.
So what's the news right now with MK Ultra? Or I mean, not MK Ultra, but Guantanamo Bay. From what I understood, Obama was trying to move the prisoners to American soil over here. Is that something? I haven't looked up in a while. Have you been keeping track of Guantanamo?
Well, a little bit. They've been resettled all around the world. It's been a big diplomatic challenge for the White House to try and find countries that will take these people, because they're like the Uyghurs, for example, who are these people from China who were an ethnic tribe that are the people that were really persecuted by the Chinese government. And they weren't terrorists. They were just caught up by some, trigger-happy people and put into Guantanamo. And now they can't go back to China, and it was really hard. But I think finally some of them have been given countries that are taking them in. So there's countries all around the world that are taking these people in, and yes, some in the United States as well. So I think there's still a core group there, and that is, these people have not been charged with crimes. They're not terrorists, and they're still stuck in Guantanamo. So it's a pretty sad human rights abuse.
The thing about it is, too, us taking in the Syrian refugees, who knows how many of them have been trained in Guantanamo Bay, or not necessarily trained, but programmed there. We have thousands upon thousands, probably millions of these individuals, if you count the satanic ritual abuse victims, the MK Ultra victims, and all these other victims. Because on the last show I talked to you, we tied in satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra to using the same tactics that they were using in this government application. Now, if David and Donna, I don't know where they're wanting to go with this exactly, because I was trying to get their perspective on the interview, and I know John's stepping off his blood pressure. Pray for John, because his blood pressure is super high, and he just sent me a shot of his blood pressure. It's 147/99, which is extremely high. So be in prayer for him tonight. I could see it on his face. He wasn't feeling well, and so I told him to check his blood pressure. I said, "You look like you're not looking too good." So, anyways, he told me he wasn't feeling right too. So he's be in prayer for him right now, because I don't know. That's high. That's super high. I know the bottom number is not supposed to be that high for sure.
David, say a prayer right now, David. I'll just pray.
Father, we just want to lift Brother Hall up to you now. Lord Jesus, we just want to pray that right now, by the blood shed on Calvary's cross, that you just touch this blood pressure, that you just help it to adjust. Just bless him mightily, that he may be effective in your service. Lord, we just agree together in prayer for this now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Man, yeah. So I just wanted to get that out there. And so, I in the last interview, we had talked about some of the stuff that they were using on, some of the things they had programmed you with, and a lot of these things will, with the audience questions that we have here, will tie into that. They've done a really good job of asking some questions, and we have them over here on the right hand side. Are you and David, Donna, are you guys opposed to starting on the questions there, and then we can kind of move on?
Absolutely not.
No, I did have
Absolutely
one
not.
thing to say in support of what Matthew said a little bit earlier. From the people we have dealt with in cults, yes, there seems to be a certain number of people when they come to us for help that it is kind of generational in some cases, and they don't really want to be a part of it. So some of them do speak out. So like Matthew said, there are some in that organization that don't want him to go ahead and speak out, and there are people. And so I would just say, by way of our listening audience here, that we all need to be very conscious of these people in our society, because you never know when you might be able to help someone. So this is another reason why that now you see TV does these kind of programs to help educate us on things we should know on how we can help these people. So thank you, John and John.
Definitely. Yeah. That's the whole goal here. Go ahead, David. I saw your book.
Well, one idea that I have, how that the SRA and the MK Ultra ties in, what I believe is that in satanic ritual abuse and in CIA programs like rendition, that they are just refining their arts. They are wanting to get their arts fine enough to where they won't have Matthew Paulies that they can't control, that are aware of the things that are going on. I think a lot of it, they're just trying out to see what they can do, to see if they really can program people to carry out acts that they normally wouldn't do. And I think this is one of the big connections with SRA and MK Ultra, because a lot of these cults that propagate satanic ritual abuse, they're tied right back into Freemasonry and right back into the government. And
Yeah.
you
I don't know. Did you guys listen to the show I did with him on TFR where we talked about the different tactics? Did you guys
Yes.
listen to that? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's astounding the connections that be made there. There's no doubt about it there. And I just think about all the different people that have been hurt by this and affected by this, and it makes you wonder what the plan is. But if we have any
And a lot of these were developed with Timothy Leary back in the late 50s and the early 60s when LSD was still legal, and he was working for the Massachusetts prison system and state-funded programs that he did on inmates to actually see what he could do. And he made the statement that with the right proportions of fear, music, sex, and drugs, that he could make anyone do anything he wanted. And we can tie Mr. Leary right back into the Golden Dawn and a lot of other subversive movements. So I think there's a very, very real connection.
Most certainly. And so, yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into some questions. If we've already asked these, just, we can just clarify them a little bit or kind of go a different angle with them. But Donna asked earlier, how many times do you believe that you have been accessed by these people?
A dozen. a dozen times approximately. It's almost hard to keep count. There's at least 5 home invasions, including 4 abductions, plus the 2005 horrific interrogation and mind control programming, plus 2007 I was given a forced electroshock in the back of a van because I'd started writing a book, and they said, "Matthew, you've been a very bad boy. You're not supposed to write. You're not supposed to talk about this. We warned you. We warned you." And they attached the things to my temples, and then zzz, and then I was out. And when I woke up, I didn't even know where I lived. They had to tell me my address, and so they destroyed my mind. They wiped out a lot of memory. And then in 2008, there was an event which I can't go into because I've been threatened for death. And my line got cut on Coast to Coast when with George Norrie when I tried to talk about 2008, so I won't talk about that. Then 2010, there was a big event called bumper lock surveillance, level 5, maximum. This surveillance meant to think you're going to be murdered. I actually had a gun pulled on me. And it's meant to discredit you because you'll seek help from the police, and they won't help you because you don't have evidence. So you'll try and go to a locked ward, and that's the whole point, is to discredit you. And then in 2014, it started with a lethal weapons test, and that was a pretty bad one. Scopolamine aerosol fog, and that was only 2 blocks away. And my dog was mortally injured in that. And then it picked up from there, 2014 to the present. It's been very, very heavy. Every few months, a major event. I also noticed another question someone asked. What are they using me for? What are the programs that they programming me to do? And that's a good question. Maybe I should first of all say that everything that I'm going to tell you that's in my conscious mind means it's no longer effective. Because the whole point of this programming is you have to be in that amnesic window of time where you don't know about the programming for it to be effective. So they can trigger you with a trigger, and then you'll perform the hypnotic program. Now that I've remembered these things, they have no effect on me. So the first program in 2005 in the back of that van, after they interrogated me as a mock Islamic Arabic terrorist, and they asked me if I was a member of Hezbollah and a member of Hamas and a whole bunch of other organizations, and it went on and on and on. After an hour of that, they taught coercive interrogation techniques, no-mark torture. So the American was teaching the Canadian Special Forces how to do no-mark torture on me. And then the last half was this mind control programming, where they tortured me until I dissociated, and then they hypnotized me and made me repeat post-hypnotic suggestions. The first one was, if I find a gun in my jacket pocket, I will immediately go to the nearest closet in my home. But before getting in the closet, I will turn the safety off on the handgun. Then I will step into the closet, close the door, and put the gun up to my head and pull the trigger in one smooth motion. And that was repeated about a dozen times, and then I had to repeat about 5 times. I will never remember this program until I find a gun in my jacket pocket. And so I'm under hypnosis at this point. I'm under dissociation. I have total amnesia afterwards. If I had found a gun in my jacket pocket while that program was still not remembered, I would have probably killed myself. The second one was, I won't give you the exact verbatim for this because it's too dangerous, but I was programmed that when a certain person introduced themselves, or any person introduced themselves with a control name that was agreed upon, if this control name person introduced themselves to me, I would treat them as my best friend and do anything they want me to do, including kill. And they trained me on how I was to kill. The third program was that if I ever found myself alone with a doctor or a nurse in a hospital that was wearing, in the psychiatric hospital or the psychiatric ward of a hospital, that was wearing a stethoscope, I would immediately strangle them with it. And he pulled out a real stethoscope and he folded it over and he showed me how to strangle somebody with it. So and this is really disturbing stuff I'm relating. And by the way, my doctor was not very impressed with that last one. He was quite upset about that. I can tell you that these things are designed so that if I ever went to try and get help for post-traumatic stress disorder, what would happen was I would discredit myself and get myself locked away for life by killing somebody, right? That's the whole point of that one. So those are the 3 big ones from 2005. And since that time, there has been so many of these MK Ultra experiments done on me in my house mostly. that I actually, in my book, I document just in January 2015, there was 4 MK Ultra experiments where they programmed me to do something, and then they'd trigger it weeks later in the real world and see what my reaction would be. And so it's this document in my book. It's actually quite interesting, and it shows you how basically there's a pattern here of getting me to do ever more escalating things that are against my will, against my self-interest, and against my will to survive, my instinct to survive. And these experiments and the results are all documented in my book. And one of the more recent ones that's apropos is, you might have noticed me doing this in the interview, where I'm nodding my head like this. This was programmed. And this is weird because I have to catch myself from doing it, because he wants me to discredit myself and look like I have some sort of Asperger's or something like that by continuously nodding my head like this. See, I was programmed to do that, and so I have to keep catching myself and stopping myself from doing that. So these are just minor things to try and mess with my ability to communicate as a whistleblower. I was programmed to exit to a certain country because they want me to go to a certain country where they will be all ready for me, and when I get there, I'll probably be killed. So I'm not going to that country.
So I mean, your professionalism is, or your professional ability is computer programming, right? Have they not used you for anything to do with that? Because that would seem like something that they would really tap into.
Yes, thankfully they overlooked that because it's very easy to get arrested for hacking, and thankfully they overlooked that because that is something obviously I could do. But that would be bad. And the thing is, I've told the police all this, and I made police statements, and they just can't seem to do anything significant to stop this. So it's sort of like I don't have any choice. I have to leave because I'm only 20 minutes away from his workplace and about 25 minutes away from where he lives. So he can just zoom by here anytime he wants and cause trouble and do horrible crimes against humanity.
Now, have they? This is hard to hear because I mean I've heard it before already, and it's just an amazing thing, or not amazing in a good way, but a really horrifying thing to think that this can be done to somebody, and they know about it, but they can't get help to be stopped. And I know that you probably tried many things, but have you tried hidden cameras before? Have you tried?
Let me comment on hidden cameras. Okay, I mentioned the RCMP were involved in the 2005 event. That's our Royal Canadian Mounted Police paramilitary. And they were involved. They actually hooked up all the torture, the RCMP officer hooked up all the torture equipment, including taping my eyelids open. I had a 100cc syringe of sodium pentothal taped to my arm and needle inserted. And I had an electroshock cuff in my upper right arm, and I went to a remote control that Mitch had. And I was hand and leg cuffed into a torture chair. So the RCMP have been involved from the beginning. Now, last year in 2015, I went to the number one guy, the company, the spy company, spy technology company in Toronto for doing hidden cameras. I gave him $3,500 cash, and I said, I need you to install these cameras. Because the Toronto police, they said to me, look, Matthew, to help you, you need to get evidence for us. Get hidden cameras. So I went to the specialist. I gave him the cash. 3 or 4 weeks later, in August, beginning or middle of August, I contacted him. I went to see him, and I said, what is going on? Why have you not done this yet? You keep giving me all these excuses. What's the problem? He said, look, I'm really sorry. I can't do your job. The RCMP came to my office. They said, oh, your name came up in our investigation of Mr. Pauly, because I'd sent him an email, right? And so they knew what I was doing with him. And they said, your name came up. And he said he couldn't do my cameras anymore. So the RCMP intimidated him so that I couldn't put in the cameras, the hidden cameras, which would protect me. Now that's interesting because in May, just a few months earlier, in 2015, the RCMP came to my house. Mitch let them in the front door after I'd been drugged and tortured. And he let them in the front door, and they came upstairs. They stood in my bedroom door with the door open with a recording device and had me confess to 2 terror plots. And this is important to mention here because this is a classic fascist technique, is you take the whistleblower and you portray them as a terrorist. So they have me on tape confessing to sending hobby rockets with explosives at the U.S. consulate in Toronto to blow it up. They have me on tape confessing to detonating an electromagnetic pulse device on Front Street in Toronto near the Internet Hub to try and take out most of Canada's Internet. They have me from 2005 confessing to being an Islamic fundamentalist terrorist who knew how to make bombs and was going to blow up the CN Tower. They have so many forced confessions out of me that it's just mind-boggling. So now apparently I am so much, Mitch has been so successful with this that the U.S. government now has me labeled as a terrorist, which means the moment they want to, they are legally, according to presidential orders, well, there's another one, they can take me out, they can kill me, is that when I was abducted in the February home invasion to that building, that apartment building I mentioned earlier, and there was that gunman there, his name was Roberto. He says, my name is Roberto, I'm from Central America. You know what I do for a living? And I said, yeah, you're a hitman. He said, yeah, that's right, Matthew, you're smart. Me and Mitch were talking about you. And he had this 45 pointed at me, and he turned the safety off, and I was just backing up against the wall of the kitchen. And I don't know how I came up with this, but I said, is that a 45? I said, one question, just one question. He said, yeah, okay, one question. I said, is that a 45? And he said, yeah, that's my baby, it's a 45. And he massages the gun like this. I said, oh, I've never seen one before. And I started coming closer and closer and closer. And Mitch is smart. And he goes, stop, put the gun away. He's going to grab it. And it's true enough, I may have grabbed it. I have had some training. Why am I training martial arts? Because I'm trying to survive, right? I mean, I've been grabbed and snatch and grabs off the street. I've had home invasions, so I've trained in some martial arts. But the reason I went here is because in that home invasion, before Roberto came in with the 45, Mitch, I didn't even know he was coming. Mitch led me into this apartment building, and I'm scopalamined, I'm torture trauma dissociated, I have no willpower. He leads me into the building to about the 15th floor. We go into this 2-bedroom apartment. I assumed it was 2-bedroom because it had a massive kitchen. And there was no knickknacks, didn't look like anybody was living there. And he says, Matthew, I think you're just a bullshitter. I don't think you're really a martial arts guy. You don't know any martial arts. And I'm just ignoring him. And he keeps going. He's teasing me like, come on, Matthew. You're just a bullshitter. You don't know any martial arts. He kept going with this, right? So finally, I'm getting a little angry. And he says, all right, Matthew, come on. Show me. Demonstrate on me. Come on, demonstrate on me. So, I mean, you can imagine after being tortured from somebody over 10 years, you might want to actually attack him would be, okay. So I attacked him, and I got him from behind. I got him to the floor. I was putting him into a double choke. Just as I'm applying the second hand in a double choke, Roberto comes in with the 45. And I just dropped Mitch on the floor immediately. And Mitch looks at the guy and says, you took long enough. And he looks at me, you didn't expect that, did you? And I said, no, I didn't expect that. And then they proceed to have me sit down on the kitchen floor, put my legs out, and he says, Matthew, are you right-handed or left-handed? Oh, before we get into that, the next thing he does is he pulls out a tape recorder. It was actually an iPhone, and he points it in my face, and he says, now, you got to say, Matthew, I was trying to kill you. And I said, I wasn't trying to kill you. I was going to let you go as soon as you tapped out. Like in martial arts training, when someone taps out, you stop, right? And I said, I was going to let you go if you tapped out. And he said, never mind, Matthew. You're going to say it. I was trying to kill you. Say it. And then he starts to reach for his gun. And as soon as he starts pulling out his gun, I'm done, right? I'm terrified. I don't like guns. So I said it. I said, okay, I was trying to kill you. So that's the third forced confession. Now, it turns out that Obama made a presidential order that the criterion for selecting how to, whether or not someone should be an assassination target is, are they a threat to U.S. military personnel? And because of that confession, I mean, after all, Mitch is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. military joint task force. I am now an assassination target. And they can take me out anytime, anywhere, but particularly outside of Canada. Now, let me just finish with the story. So I'm in the kitchen. He tells me to spread my legs out, straight out. I put my legs straight out. And he says, Matthew, you're right-handed or left-handed? And I said, well, I'm right-handed. He said, are you sure, Matthew? Because if you get this wrong, you're going to die. You might die. And I said, I'm right-handed. I'm absolutely sure I'm right-handed. He says, okay, good. Now take off your sock. So I take off my sock. And then Roberto, the gunman, puts this battery clip on my second toe. And I'm thinking, what's this about, right? And so he puts this battery clip on my second toe. It was non-serrated, so it wouldn't leave marks. And then Roberto's holding this chromed metal thing, very phallic looking, and it has a rubber insulator on his side of it. And Mitch says, now, you touch that, Matthew. And I said, no, I'm not going to touch that. Even though I was torture trauma dissociated and scopolamine, I still didn't want to touch that because I knew what was going to happen. And he started pulling out his gun again, right? And so, okay, I touched it. And then, bang. I was out. I mean, it was like a bolt of lightning went from my arm through my body to my leg. It was my right, actually. And it was so horrific, so powerful. I just went out. So I was electrocuted with a vehicle battery, 3 blocks from the center of Canada's largest city. And we are, of course, the #1 ally of the United States of America. So like some third world dictatorship, torture technique, right? I almost died. When I woke, I had an arm around me by Roberto, arm around me by Mitch. I'm sitting on the floor. They're talking about me. My eyes are closed. And when I open my eyes, Mitch says, oh, you're back. I didn't know if you were going to make it. You stopped breathing. That's okay. I restarted your breathing. So that's the gruesome February 22nd, or February home invasion and abduction, which involved not only a forced confession as someone trying to kill a U.S. personnel, but being electrocuted with a vehicle battery. It was actually, I might even ask them, I said, is that a car battery you use? And they said, no, actually, it is a vehicle battery, but it's actually a motorcycle battery. And they said, you know why we use a motorcycle battery? And I said, yeah, because it's more portable. And they said, yeah, that's right, Matthew. So they carried a motorcycle battery in for that purpose.
I mean, wow, that's outrageous. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you've been going through for a long time. There's a couple more questions. There's a bunch more questions in here, so I'm going to kind of stroll through them here, and feel free to expand any way you want. We don't have a set time limit or anything like that on the show. So, normally we go 2 hours, but if it goes under or over, it's no big deal on here. So, okay. Let me see where we're at here. So we asked that one. We've got tons of them in here. I'm scrolling through. From Jordan, have you noticed more or less harassment from these sickos or psychos? I don't know exactly. After going on John B. Wells and Now You See TV show.
Less. John B. Wells was a pretty big win. I'm just trying to think, was that before or after July 11th? July 11th was the devastation at work. I believe it was before John B. Wells. Yeah, and so since John B. Wells, I have not seen any obvious activity, except that within hours, I had cars parked in front of my house with surveillance devices poking out of the roof, and shady-looking people getting out of them and then coming back after a few hours. And then I saw our Canadian Security Intelligence Service ladies, who are the good people, who are actually they're running counter-surveillance in front of my house. When they see that I'm at high risk after these interviews, like they might be out at my place tonight or tomorrow morning, when they think I'm at high risk. And the whole point of them being there is that's a communication from spy to spy that we're watching Matthew. If you don't try anything with Matthew, because we're watching. So there's been some of that throughout, which is good. I mean, at least I have one group of people in the Canadian security apparatus who have been doing some monitoring and some counter surveillance, but they still have yet to meet with me. I've said to them, look, you should meet with me and let me debrief. I can tell you so much, not just about the U.S. stuff, but there's other intelligence agencies involved in this, one other intelligence agency. And there's stuff that's just important for Canadian government to know, but they haven't met with me. So there's been less since I've been doing this John B. Wells and then your interview and others in the last month or two.
Okay, very cool. I'm glad. Hopefully it gets less and less as they continue. They leave you alone. That would be great. I know we're praying for you, and I know we really hope you're free of this, because I know this has to be just the most disturbing thing. I can't imagine much worse going on in somebody's life, because there are bad things that happen to people, obviously, but an ongoing thing, never knowing when you're going to live, or if you're going to be able to live till tomorrow, never knowing if you're going to be killed, never knowing if your family is going to leave you, never knowing what, all those things are horrifying. So the next question we have is from CB.
Yep.
Is there a difference in MK Ultra victims and targeted individuals of gang stalking?
Yes, there's a difference. Targeted individual, if you remember back in mathematics, you have like a Venn diagram. So the TIs would be a large circle, literally of a million or more people in the United States and Canada, over a million. But MK Ultra people is a tiny circle in the middle of maybe, like I said before, about 5,000 or 10,000 in the U.S. and maybe 500 to 1,000 in Canada. And the targeting of those people is really, really physical. I mean, we're talking, in your face torture and guns put to your head and drugging and assaults. Whereas the general TI thing is more gang stalking and directed energy weapons for the end game. And so, yeah, there is a difference. But I mean, obviously there's similarities too. We're targeting individuals have the same issues. But the MK Ultra thing is I mean, it's almost like a more pointy stick directed by fewer people. Now, within that MK Ultra circle, you have a much smaller circle, which is the super soldiers. Super soldiers are those people who have been in MK Ultra since essentially birth or early childhood. And these are people that have been specially chosen to become, throughout their lives, assets of the intelligence agencies, who are so messed up by the time they hit teenage time, they probably got dozens of alters. And these are subpersonalities. These people have what I call dissociative identity disorder. Used to be called multiple personality disorder. And these people are so abused, probably the most abused people on the earth. And then they go into the military and they learn how to kill effectively. And then they're used for, I told you about the 3 guys in San Benedito that were accosted in the medical center, all dressed in black with bulletproof vests and balaclavas. And they were shooting women and children and everybody. Those would have been super soldiers. So there's like 3 circles, 3 concentric circles. Super soldiers, the MK Ultra, and then a larger TI.
Wow. Okay. For the next question here, what is the best way for you to protect yourself from the abuse, from the MK Ultra abuse?
Well, I wish I could speak from experience. I mean, I haven't obviously been very successful at protecting myself. And the only thing I haven't tried yet is to leave. And I have been told by others that leaving, is probably the best thing you can do. But then again, those others hadn't gone so high profile as I've gone. So I think it's a big question mark whether or not leaving is going to really end up helping me or not. But I'm certainly been willing to try anything. I mean, I need to try and survive, and because I want to make the message, I want to make a difference in this planet. I don't have that much time left. I mean, I probably have 5 years at the most because of these cancer injections that I've had, and I want to do everything I can, and to do that, I have to be alive. I'm particularly looking for a religious community that would take me in.
Well, if there's anybody listening that has a community in the Canada area that would be willing to take Matthew in, it would be greatly appreciated. And tell them, Matthew, real quick, how they can get a hold of you if for this reason or for nothing else to order your book.
Sure. So the important thing I think for people to write down, if they're going to write down something to get a hold of me, would be to write down my Facebook profile. because I talk to everybody on Facebook, and it also has all my interviews as well, and I use it quite a lot. And so that's facebook.com/Matthew, MATTHEW, .Pauley, PAULEY 99. And by the way, that E is just for my Facebook page because the name was taken already. So again, that's Matthew, MATTHEW .Pauley, PAULEY 99. And that's my Facebook profile. And I'll give you one more link, and that's my publisher or book distributor spotlight page, which has a lot of interviews I've done, and my book is for sale there as well. Although it's available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and places like this, but this is a good site because it has sort of my personal page. And that's lulu.com, LULU.com /spotlight, just like it sounds, spotlight, /Matthew Pauley, MATTHEW no E. So it's just PAULY.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so this next question is a little bit out of order, but I'm going to ask it because it goes along with what you're talking about. And it says, are you able to go off grid? Basically, the reason they're asking is because are asking if you have any chips in you that could possibly track you. Yeah.
I'm afraid that the likelihood of that is rather high because I've been put unconscious so many times, and I've actually awoke with scars. I had a scar here it was like a zipper, like a chevron, and these were scars, and it was done with a machine that literally ironed on, basically sutured together where there'd been a cut in the flesh. So that's probably not a good sign. Also, in the van in 2005, an air gun was used in the back of my neck to shoot something up the base of my skull. And now I don't know, was this a false, fake operation to make me think that I'd had something inserted, or was something really inserted? I had different results on MRIs. One MRI showed something, and all of a sudden, when I got to my doctor, it didn't show something. Because they called me into the hospital to coach me and say that don't worry about this. It's just a little stone or something. Don't worry about this. But then when I got to my doctors, there was a different one, different letter too, from the specialist. So they were monkeying around there. And there was also an insertion with a needle into my inner ear, right through my ear, into my inner ear twice. And I've gone to a specialist, ear, nose, and throat specialist, and I have a whole buildup of fluid in here. I've lost about 1/3 of my hearing. And he wanted to do surgery to put in a drain, and I said no surgery. Like going under general anesthetic, is a dangerous thing, and particularly with my situation, going into a hospital. So yeah, the chances of me having a chip are pretty high.
All right, Diana asks, can you ask Matthew to discuss his tattoo, the one that he got as a precaution?
Yeah. So being creative, I thought to myself, well, I'm at great risk here as being used. I mean, that's what MK Ultra is all about, right? Is using people to do things against their will. And if you want someone to self-destruct, the biggest, most effective way is to use them in a false flag terror event. That is to say, a hate crime, a shooting, assassination, or a mass attack with a deadly weapon. So I thought, okay, I'm a humanist, and I'm spiritual, and I do not like hurting people. That is not, I'm against that. So I'm going to stop this. I got this tattoo, and this tattoo on my thigh basically marks my body and says, this is my name, and this is the story. I'm a non-consensual sleeper assassin test subject. Doctor, coroner, look for scopolamine and other poisons. Contact the Toronto Star, news columnists. So it right away says that if they found my body in a major crime, that this major crime has probably been staged. Now, that being said, Mitch pointed out to me that they now have a chemical. Actually, with the newspaper, the Toronto Star, 3 days after I sent them the tattoo, ran a big article on page A2 saying, there's this new substance that can wipe off tattoos. It's a new chemical. It's under R&D right now. It's going to be commercialized soon. So and letting me know that, this is not such a great insurance policy. And Mitch actually said that to me too. He said, look, the chemical's out there, we've got it. He says, in fact, I'm getting my tattoo taken off with it. So we can wipe that off you anytime. Don't think you're safe.
One thing that I would suggest, and this is just a suggestion, is giving several notes to several people via there's messages you can store in bank vaults and have it pass on to somebody when you die. The only problem is, I guess you would want to get it to them like as soon as you die. That might create a little issues, but maybe getting several people you trust with messages, if there is anybody you trust anymore, so that they can pass these messages on to the morgue. It's just, I'm sure you've thought about that, but just a suggestion that came to mind that may be something that that helps in the future. I'm not sure. Hopefully this never happens. Hopefully the prayer, hopefully you'll be delivered from this, Matthew. This is a horrible thing to go through. So this is the next question. I think this is a really good question by Ed, because I was wondering this myself. Does Matthew think that some of the abduction by Greys or alien memories are connected with MK Ultra experiences?
Okay, so that's a good question. Now, I got to say up front, I have nothing against people who believe in aliens and also in UFOs. And I think, as Carl Sagan once wrote, the idea that we're alone in this universe and there's no other intelligent life is quite naive and arrogant. However, because our media and our general knowledge is accepted by science has not accepted the existence of aliens and UFOs, it means, as a whistleblower of something really serious, that we whistleblowers have to say, no, actually, we're not going to talk about that subject, because anybody who quotes me now about that subject is going to be discrediting my story in the eyes and the ears of the news media consumers who believe that UFOs and aliens don't exist. So like on my Facebook page, if someone starts putting in comments about aliens and UFOs, I just shut it down, because my message is really serious. It's really important. And I don't want people not to believe me because other items that are not yet considered science, truth, fact, are present. And in fact, we must remember that this is one of the major disinformation techniques that the CIA, Civilian Intelligence Agency, and other organizations use to discredit whistleblowers, is they'll go on their websites and their chat rooms and they'll put stuff about UFOs and aliens and stuff, and also say that they're a paranoid schizophrenic. That's another number one top disinformation technique. So that's my answer to that.
Okay, and Valerie asks, can somebody be under this control and not know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the scary thing, is that after these events, like, for example, I awoke in the week of June 19th with two little holes in the center of my chest, the little perforations of the skin, about only like a quarter inch apart. And I didn't know what it was. Or maybe a half inch, I can't remember exactly, half to a quarter. I didn't know what it was. How is it that I had these two distinctive marks in the center of my chest? And now it's only been, that was, June 19th, week of June 19th. Now here we are in September, the latter part of September, that I've recalled what happened. But what happened was, when Mitch had come after my wife by some of these activities that he was doing to me, I basically resisted physically, and I started to attack him. And he tasered me with a taser. And that's how he brought me down. And he tasered me in the heart. I was actually lying on the ground at this point, because after I had thrown him to the ground, and I was out now on the ground, I'm lying on my back. He said, you just stay right here. And because I'm torture, trauma, dissociated, and all that stuff, I just stayed there on my back. He came into the room, and he tasered me right in the heart. And he said, now that was an attempted assassination, because he aimed it right at my heart. And that's why I had those two marks. And luckily I didn't die, but I was completely incapacitated. I mean, I've never been tased before in my life. And that was pretty scary, I'll tell you.
Yeah, very scary to think that people could be under this and not know. And I think, I can tell you this. I had an experience. I've told you guys the experience I had with a guy that had been under what he called special classes in school, and had issues like this, and I believe he was probably a part of a program similar to this at one time here in Evansville, Indiana. So anyways, we'll move on to the next question here. This one's by Diana. Have they tried to institutionalize Matthew or label him a paranoid schizophrenic? I ask not because I think he's crazy. I know he's telling the truth and these things really happen, but I'm wondering if they have tried to discredit him by labeling him crazy.
Only in some of the comments under my Sean Stone interview in 2015. They tried at that point, somebody tried, who was obviously working, being paid, to label me that way, to try and discredit me. So they try that, but I have so many people who see my message as truthful and believe me that they usually jump all over those people, and it usually kind of backfires when they do that. I should mention that I have a letter which is in the preface of my book. It's the last page of the preface, and it's a letter prepared by a psychiatrist who I was seeing for post-traumatic stress disorder from 2006 to 2011, 5 years, for an hour a week. And in that letter, he says, at first I had concerns that Matthew's reports about being interrogated and tortured by government anti-terrorist forces might be false. So we tried drug trials on 3 of the most efficacious antipsychotics, including clozapine. And after these trials, he has full memory and certainty and recall of these events, and he has not been diagnosed with a delusional illness. So they tested me, and they couldn't find anything. So, and I have that document, signed letter from a psychiatrist in my book by permission of the psychiatrist.
Very good. Okay, so the next question is by George, and this is a good question. I asked you this on the last show we were together on TFR. He says, question for Matthew. Was there any spiritual overtones to the programming he went under, or any mention of Satan or Jesus?
There was the satanic symbology and a satanic voice that was used on me I was forced to wear 3D goggles in the van during the mind control programming part in 2005. And they put in a DVD and they played this stuff to me. And some of it was satanic imagery. And it was really scary stuff. And they also forced me to watch a short bit of Snow White, the Disney film, with a slightly different soundtrack. And it was a very low, gravelly, scary voice that was sort of satanic sounding in that soundtrack. And I refused to watch it. And anyway, so I was closing my eyes. Well, I couldn't really close my eyes. They were taped open. But I was, shaking my head and, saying, I can't watch this. And then again in 2015, January, when I was abducted to a lakeshore area warehouse in Toronto, this was a horror show out of the movie. There was a dentist chair, and I was forced to lie down in this dentist chair with this light, and he was going at my teeth. And then he made me sit in this chair and watch this movie, and there was a lot of bodies and dead people, and it was just really disturbing stuff.
Interesting. So yeah, that right there tells me that there is a deeper side to all this other than physical. And so let's go on to Ed's question here. This is a good question. Then he says, okay, please understand my heart in asking this question. Not cold or uncaring at all, just have to ask, how can Matthew be sure that going rogue / whistleblower is not the intended action by the controllers? I'm sure he has thought about this.
Well, here I know it wasn't the intended action originally, because in 2007, the event that they did against me was to do a snatch and grab off King Street in Toronto, and using an inhalant-soaked rag over my mouth, pull me into the back of the van in a headlock, and I went unconscious. When I woke up, I was in this gurney, strapped to this gurney, and that's when they said, Matthew, you've been a bad boy. You've been talking about what happened. You're not supposed to talk about what happened. We warned you. And then they put the ECT on me, electroconvulsive therapy. It was not therapy. So they clearly did not want me to go public originally. But when they saw over a period of 10 years that I just would not stop, and I kept writing this book and rewriting this book, and I was pushing to get this book done, at some point they figured out, well, we can't really kill him because he's going to draw a lot of attention if we kill him. And then they realized, well, maybe we'll try and co-opt the thing. They tried to co-opt the book and tried to change it and tried to delete chapters and stuff, but it didn't work. I just kept rewriting everything. But they tried to then contribute a little bit by making corrections to some of the things, and I knew some of these corrections were correct. I didn't correct all the things, but a few of the ones that they said, they actually did make sense, that it was truthful. For example, the time of approach on Yonge Street in 2005 was 9:40 p.m., which made more sense because at the donut shop when I left, it was 9:32 p.m., and I walked my friend from the donut shop down to the subway 2 blocks, came back north. That would be about 8 minutes. So I changed it in my book to 9:40. Other things, little things like that, little details. So they were actually trying to contribute to the effort. So the answer is yes, eventually they tried to basically encourage me to be the whistleblower because they realized, some people in the organization realized that, hey, I could make a difference here for the good of the country, for the good of humanity.
All right, very interesting. Matthew, this is something I want to give you as advice and also just try out if this happens to you again. I want to ask you if you've ever done it, but when this has happened to you, I would ask, because I've had an experience, spiritual experiences, but trying to be abducted in the spiritual experience, and I called on the name of Yeshua or Jesus. Yeshua is his Hebrew name, Jesus is his English name, and the thing stopped. Have you ever tried that? And if not, will you try that the next time that this happens?
The answer is no, I have not tried it before, but after what happened the other night, with the Carrico's help, I think that I'm going to try that next time. If it ever is a next time, I'm going to do that. Yes.
Awesome. I really want that for you because according to the scripture, his name is the name above all names, and the demons fear his name. And if these people, which I believe probably are intact with demons, this could be a possible help. I know that in my situation that I had, where I felt like I was being abducted by something, whether a demon, whatever it may have been, when I couldn't even talk because my throat was being choked. But in my head, I said those names. I said Yeshua, Jesus, Yahweh. I just used all the names that I could think of for the Father and the Son, and it stopped instantly. So I just, I wanted to throw that out there. There's no more questions in the chat, but one thing I would like to tell anybody out there that is experiencing anything like this, that you can contact David or Donna. David and Donna are trained in, not trained, but they've been dealing with people for 30 years that have been involved either in satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra, all these different things. And so they are good about, being able to pray with you, help you, talk to you, and do that kind of stuff. I'd say call me, but I don't think that I would do much good other than, I feel sorry for you and I would pray for you. But David and Donna have been dealing with this for a long time. Matthew, I want to give you one more opportunity, or many, you can say it 50 times if you want, I don't really care, but tell people how they can get your book, how they can get in touch with you, and how they can help, because I know you have a petition right now as well that you would like people to sign.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you. So the book is called The Murder of Time, Making and Unmasking a Sleeper by Matthew Pauly, Pauly. And you can get it by going to lulu.com, lulu.com/spotlight, just like it sounds, LIGHT, spotlight.com. Sorry, spotlight/Matthew Pauly, MATTHEWPAULY.
And Donna, can you put that in the chat if you can remember it, or in that way people in the chat can go and fill that out, because that's going to be very hard to remember. And make sure you guys get a hold of them on Facebook so you can remember that as well. But say that website one more time, and I'll type it in there.
Sure. lulu.com/spotlight/Matthew Pauly, 2 T's in Matthew.
One more time, lulu.com
/spotlight.
Spotlight. Okay, go ahead with that.
/ Matthew, MATTHEW Pauly, PAULY.
LY or LUY, just regular.
Yeah, it's just no E.
There we go. I put it in there. So
Thank you.
yeah. And so make sure you guys go check out the book, sign the petition. Let's get this. And David and Donna, if you guys have any more questions or suggestions to the audience, feel free to do so. And I just want to thank you guys all so much for coming on the show. This has been a blessing. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people out here that can relate to this. There's people that are being gang stalked. There's people that are being ritually abused. There's people that are being under this program, MK Ultra, all over the world. And if you're listening to this right now, there is help. And I believe that there is help in the Messiah as well. I really do think that freedom comes in all shapes and sizes, or freedom comes for anybody, because I was a drug addict. And the day that I accepted the Messiah, the day that I allowed him to come into my life and change, my drug addiction was gone completely. And I was addicted to at least 5 or 6 different drugs. So I think there's freedom. If there's freedom in that for me, I think there's freedom in this through Jesus, through Yeshua. And I think that it's important to recognize that freedom. And I'm going to be keeping in touch with Matthew. We're going to keep you guys updated on how he's been doing. And just be in prayer for him. Please be in prayer for him, because this is something that nobody should have to go through as a human being. This is something that is so disgusting that people have to go through this, and there's no help for him. Because I know this. There is help through the Messiah. Whether he dies in the end, he has hope now. He has hope in hope that he will have a better life after this. Hope that the people that have been doing this will come to justice, and every tear will be wiped away. All these people that are doing this stuff will be brought to the light, and that is the thing they're scared of the most, is being brought to the light. Just like every cockroach runs when the lights come on, just like every rat runs when the lights come on, when somebody approaches them, when you shine the light on them, these people will run and be scared when the light approaches them. And one day, everything comes to the light. No deed in secret is not brought out. Every deed that's done in secret is brought out before each one of us, and brought out before the throne room of the Most High. He sees everything. These people think that they're doing this stuff in secret. They think they'll get away with it. They will not get away with it. And in fact, they're going to suffer for it. They're going to take the punishment that the fallen angels should have been taking, and they're going to be taking those judgments. So if you're listening right now and you're one of these people, repent right now. Repent and be done with this stuff, because you're going to end. And you have repentance. Guess what? There is forgiveness. Even if you've done these things to other people, there's forgiveness for even you. I've done horrible things in my life. You're not too evil to have forgiveness. Stop it now. Repent. Seek forgiveness. For all of you that are going through this, seek the help. The Bible says that the Lord is close to those who are brokenhearted, close to the downtrodden. And this is what he loves you, and he wants to be there with you. And I'll just let David and Donna talk now, but I just want you guys to realize that there's so much out there that is just wicked, but there's also so much light that is out there. And just like the Johnny Cash song goes, sooner or later he's going to
shut him down.
Gonna cut you down.
Cut you down. So sooner or later he's going to cut you down, guys out there, the ones who are out there that are doing this to people. And I hope you are listening. I hope you repent, and I hope you change your ways.
But John, I tell you what, I couldn't have said it any better than you just did.
Mm-hmm.
God, he is on the throne, and he can protect us, and we have to trust him that he knows people's hearts, and he is a just judge. So we thank the Lord for that opportunity that we've heard Matthew's testimony again tonight. I totally agree with John. Thank you so much, John, for having him on again, and thank you, Matthew, for sharing again.
Something we always say is that there's nothing that the devil can do to someone that God can't undo. And one thing that I see and recognize in Matthew, that Matthew is someone that the Lord has his hand on. He's moving in the purpose and plan of God and doing what he's doing. And when we're in the center of God's will, that's the safest place we can be. And I want everyone that's been victimized and abused in any way to have hope. And I want Matthew to have hope, because I know that all of our Now You See TV audience will agree in prayer that not only do you just survive, but that you thrive, that your health will be restored, that you're going to continue to move in God's will and purpose in your life, and that I believe you are just now beginning to discover that big plan that God has placed you in. So I want you to have hope, Matthew, and to know that here in Evansville, Indiana, and all around the world, you've got some people praying for you.
Thank you so much, both Donna and David, for your such kind words and encouraging words. And I think, and John, your little summary there, these are, so encouraging and giving me hope. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
David, I'm sorry, Matthew, there's no coincidences. There's not even, that's not even a word in the Hebrew language. Coincidence is not a word. This is a divine appointment. This is a time. You were supposed to talk to us. You're supposed to meet us. You're supposed to meet the Maker. And I think that this is amazing time for you. This is going to be something that changes your life, not because you met us, but because you met the King, because you realize that he is the Lord of all. He's the creator of all. He is the name above all names. He's the King of kings and Lord of lords. And that right there will change your life. It changed my life. And I'm that happy for you. Thankful for David and Donna that sat and talked with you for several hours. I love that. That's just amazing. And so anyways, shalom, guys. It was a blessing to talk to you, and everybody high five. Thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you next time. We'll keep you updated on Matthew and hopefully have him back on again within the next few months or whenever. So be blessed, and we'll talk to you guys later.